Hi, everyone. Hello. I am going to talk about the neurohormonal dashboard today. And I want to keep it astonishingly simple because when you're in hormonal imbalance, your life feels like a 500-page book with lots of scientific citations, which is what I just wrote. And I don't want people to have to slog through that. So that was how my book started, and then it got edited down, distilled. We're going to be talking about the neuroendocrine system, and I want to really focus today on a few things with the time that we have. I want to really laser down into our latest thinking about PMS, our latest thinking about women making the choice about whether to take estrogen or not, and the issue of dysestrogenism, where estrogen isn't right. It's not in its Goldilocks position of not too high, not too low, and the role of alcohol. I know the Wine and Jazz Festival starts tonight, but I've got a little data for you there. And also breast cancer. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the latest thinking on breast cancer and how we metabolize estrogen. So I talked before about memes. Memes are these ideas we're spreading in our culture. And here's my meme for this talk. I really believe that we face this epidemic of neurohormonal imbalance in the US right now. Men and women, but especially women. And I don't think that diet, sleeping pills, and SSRIs are going to solve it. And I'm careful when I say this because I do think that there's a time and a place for prescription medication. I don't want to have that either-or dualistic thinking about it. But it's for such a tiny population compared to the number that are prescribed it. So if we just take SSRIs for a moment, we know from quite rigorous studies that SSRIs for mild to moderate depression are worse than placebo. Worse than placebo. And by that I mean increased risk of stroke, increased risk of breast and ovarian cancer, proven last year, a study that came out of Harvard, increased risk of weight gain, also among women who take it in pregnancy, greater risk of preterm labor and neonatal convulsions. So I do not think that SSRIs are the answer. We got to look a little further. So I mentioned my great-grandmother in my first talk. This is a picture of her in the 1940s with a fawn. And my great-grandmother, I know you can't see this very well. You have to be at the right angle. She was named Mud because my grandfather couldn't say the German word for mother, Mutter, and mud stuck. She is the one who would arrive at our home in suburban Maryland with these suitcases of Whole Foods. And she took about 20 supplements a day. She would give me lectures over breakfast about the merits of fish oil when I was 6 years old. So she had figured out a lot ahead of her time, and it's really influenced me in my thinking about how to take care of patients and how to help them negotiate their own cure. Because I really believe that each patient is their own best physician, and we are all healers to support that. So here's some of our learning objectives. You have them in your handout. I'm not going to march through them. We've got bigger fish to fry. So I want to talk about Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels. Where's my friend in the back who did like this? Yeah, thank you. So 1978, Charlie's Angels comes out. I got to watch it some of the time because I was 10 years old and my mother thought it was too violent. But when I was thinking about the hormones that really influence women, that are the needle drivers for women, many of these are also an issue for men, but I don't have testosterone here. We can talk about it if you have questions at the end. But when it comes to women, I was really interested in the interdependence between these three hormones: cortisol, thyroid hormone, and estrogen. and also how estrogen tangos with progesterone, because I find that a lot of women don't have such a good tango. These three hormones you want working for you and not against you. You want them on your team. You want all three Charlie's Angels supporting you, I think, to be mission-driven, to really feel like your energy tank is full. And I usually find that women have a problem with one or more of these. But this is the paradigm that I use. And when I start talking about the neurohormonal control system, and I show them a picture of the brain and the hypothalamus and the pituitary and how it controls the adrenals and how the HPA axis also inversely correlates with their HP thyroid axis and their HP gonadal axis, they just look at me. And so I pull this out, and it's much more helpful. So they get Charlie's Angels, and I think it's a good way to conceive of this. Laurel Ulrich at Harvard, she's a historian, wrote this great book, Well-Behaved Women Seldom Make History. And that's a bit of context that I want to use to talk about PMS, premenstrual syndrome. Because I don't think that PMS is something that we need to medicate away necessarily. Because I think it often, for many women, allows them to speak their truth. And they're under a hormonal veil the rest of the month. So I'm really cautious when I talk about things like PMS. But I do want to talk about some of the suffering that happens and what can be done about it. Okay, so let's talk about PMS. Let me give you a quick case. So a woman I saw last week, 39-year-old, assistant dean at a university in the Bay Area that shall remain nameless. And she has 3 kids, works a lot, has a lot of evening events, and just feels like she's never doing a good enough job in any of the realms where she hangs out. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not in her job. In the 7 days before her period, she feels insane. She feels like she goes from 0 to 60 and screams over minor things. And she felt like she was either going to have to start couples therapy or whatever I had for her needed to work immediately. And she really felt like, my husband wanted me to come because our marriage is suffering. And we know from the data that it tends to be the intimate relationship that suffers the most. In fact, PMS has been used to support murder defense, especially in England, for women who have murdered their intimate partner. Okay, how did I get on that? Let's move on. All right, so this is the endocrine system, very simplified. I just wanted to highlight that the pituitary and the hypothalamus are hanging out right over here, connected to the limbic system. And I think it's important to mention these connections because just as we have these silos in medicine of, oh, your stomach hurts, go to the gastroenterologist. You have achy joints, how about a rheumatologist? Just as we have silos, I feel like we have silos when we think about the endocrine system. Not just sending people to endocrinologists, but thinking, okay, you have a thyroid problem, I'm not going to address any adrenal issues. And what I really want you to leave this talk today with is the crosstalk, this constant conversation that is going on between the hypothalamic pituitary adrenals, the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid, hypothalamic pituitary gonads. So constant crosstalk, and as I mentioned earlier, cortisol is king. Cortisol trumps all others because your blood pressure and your blood glucose are more of a priority than your ovulation in your gonads and even your thyroid, your metabolism. So that's why the others get squashed by cortisol. A little biochemistry, just for a quick moment. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things here. You know that most of the sex hormones come from cortisol. pregnenolone, fascinating hormone that I would love to talk about today, and we don't have time. Pregnenolone goes on to make DHEA and the androgens and also your estrogens. And on this side, pregnenolone gets made into progesterone and aldosterone. But this is the priority no matter what. And what happens when you're a stress case, like I was 15 years ago, is that your body will just pump that pregnenolone down into the cortisol cascade. And it will make less of all the other hormones. So you will make this at the expense of all the others. And even though thyroid is not a sex hormone and it's not listed here, this will also trump thyroid. And this is called pregnenolone steal. That's why this little wavy arrow is here. The other thing that happens is that the receptors for these hormones are promiscuous. They're not just, one receptor, one hormone. So, for instance, the receptor for progesterone also binds cortisol. So if you have a ton of cortisol on your neurohormonal dashboard, it is going to plug those progesterone receptors. And what does progesterone do? It calms us down. It calms us down. It is the partner to estrogen. Estrogen is the one that gives women breasts and hips, makes us flirty, does a few other things if you got too much of it. But you want the right balance between estrogen and progesterone. And if you're blocking the progesterone receptors, it kind of doesn't matter how much progesterone you have in your body if it can't get into the cell. So I think we made this point already. Enough anatomy. Let's talk about PMS and progesterone resistance. Don't worry. I know it's late on a Friday. Ignore this part here.